ever just randomly wonder if trading is present even in the smallest things that we do in life? Have you ever purchased an item from Lazada overseas? Oops, not sponsored. Anyways, for today's episode of Crash Discourse, we will talk about international trading.
Welcome to the Crash Discourse. This is International Trading.
Hi guys! Welcome to another episode where I'll be discussing something and you will learn something. Anyway, here we go! Presenting international trade. So what words come to your mind when you hear the word international trade? Quota? Import? Export? Tariffs? Later on, we will discuss all of that, but let us first define what is international trade.
No money on the island. Sounds familiar, right? I know you already heard it 1,000 of times. But don't you know that it can also be applied to economics? Fortunately, yes. More particularly, in the international trade. International trade refers to the exchange involving a good or service conducted between at least two different countries. It allows countries to expand their markets and access to goods and services that are not available domestically. The exchanges can be import and export. Basically, the import is the good or services brought into the domestic country, while the import is the good or services that are sold to a foreign country. Simple as that.
Nowadays, anything that's free seems to be good to be true, right? Let me ask you something. When we say free trade, do you think the free in free trade really free? Spoiler alert, it is not. It is called free trade because the movement of goods and services comes with few restrictions and limitations as possible.
Have you ever wondered what the key benefits are in a free trade agreement? Well, I know for sure. The answer is no. Who on earth would randomly think about it, right? So, what do nations get upon engaging in a free trade agreement?
First, there's no monopoly. No, not a game. When there's free trade and tariffs and quotas are eliminated, monopolies are also eliminated. Why? Of course, more players can come in and join the market. We must give chance to others, right? Second, there's a lowered market price. When there is competition, especially on a global level, prices will surely go down, allowing consumers to enjoy a higher purchasing power. I mean, who doesn't even want a cheap price when all we do is wait for a 6.6 online sale in Lazada and Shopee? Oops, not me. Third, there's a specialization for countries. When there is intense competition, countries will tend to produce the products or goods that they are most efficient at. Efficient use of resources means maximizing profit. We all have something we're good at, right? Maybe specialization at procrastination. Just kidding. No, I'm not. Get your life together.
Enough of that. Now, how do you think free trade agreement works? Is it literally free in every aspect?
In modern settings, free trade policy is often implemented by means of formal and mutual agreement of the nations involved. However, a free trade policy may simply be the absence of trade restrictions. A government doesn't need to take specific actions to promote free trade, but it also doesn't necessarily abandon all control of imports and exports or eliminate all protectionist policies. This hands-off stance is referred to as laissez-faire trade or trade liberalization. You know, like when you stay out past curfew but your parents didn't scold you because you were out doing group study. Yeah, kinda like that.
Free trade agreement don't just reduce and eliminate tariffs. They also help address the behind the borders barriers that would otherwise delay the flow of goods and services, encourage investment, and improve the rules affecting such issues as intellectual property, e-commerce, and government procurement. The theory of comparative advantage. By specializing in goods where countries have a lower opportunity cost, there can be an increase in economic welfare for all countries. Free trade enables countries to specialize in those goods where they have a comparative advantage. Economies of scale. If countries can specialize in any certain goods, they can benefit from economies of scale and lower average cost. It will lead to lower prices for consumers and greater efficiency for exporting firms. Tariffs may encourage inefficiency. If any economy protects its domestic industry by increasing tariffs, industries may not have any incentives to cut costs.
Oh, do you still need an example? Of course, sure, yes. The longer the exposure in this video, the better. Now, I'm passing this phone to someone who claims they're free. But are they really?
Stop! I'm not like that. Just because I'm not completely free doesn't mean I'm unworthy. Don't believe me? Well, one notable example of free trade today is the European Union, right? So, the member nations form an essentially borderless single entity for the purposes of trade, and the adoption of the euro by most of those nations smoothed the way further. It should be noted that this system is regulated by a bureaucracy based in Brussels that must manage the many trade-related issues that come up between the representatives of the member nations.
Another example of the free trade agreement, well, that's me, is between the Philippines and the European Free Trade Association. It started in 2013, where the Philippines started having discussions with the European Union regarding the Exploratory Free Trade Agreement, or FTA, that includes the objectives, key principles, and the scope of FTA negotiations. Scoping negotiations were concluded during a meeting between Philippines and EU trade ministers in Brussels on October 2, 2015, and the launching was announced on 11th of December 2015. EFTA covers such as trade in goods and services, investment, and the like.
Hope I made myself clear. Anyway, I'm passing this phone to someone who is the killjoy mom of the group. Literally stricter than my parents. Oh.
Me? Killjoy and mom of the group? Seriously? Do I look like that? But kidding aside, protectionism, as a policy that I restrict trade with other nations in order to protect domestic industries from foreign competitors. I'm doing this for our own good, okay? And at least, I mainly use to help reduce imports of levels of our country to increase its trade balance by imposing tariffs, subsidies, quotas, and other import restrictions. So how does protectionism policy work? You may ask.
So here comes the boring part. But don't worry, I'll make this short for you guys. So, during the Great Depression, the United States passed a law that implemented protectionist trade policies, which also known as Smoot-Hawley tariffs in 1930. So this law was designed to protect farmers from agricultural imports from Europe. That time, US farmers were already suffering from the Dust Bowl, while European farmers were ramping up production after the destruction of World War I. But Congress added many other tariffs. As a result, other countries walked out. Ha! Of course, they retaliated. The resultant trade war restricted global trade, and it was one of the reasons for the extended severity of the Great Depression.
These are the common types of protectionism. First is tariff. It is a term for tax imposed by governments on imports from other countries to protect its own industries and raise tax revenues. Another one is quota.
These are direct restrictions on the number of certain goods and commodities that may be permitted to be imported into a nation. There is also a term called voluntary export restraint or VER that acts as a trade quota imposed by an exporting nation. It comes in the form of political pressure by another country in order to stop the export of goods or commodities. Embargo is a government-regulated restriction with a specified country on the exchange of a specific goods that is usually created as a result of unfavorable political or economic circumstances between nations, designed to isolate a country and create difficulties for its governing body, forcing it to act on the issue that led to the embargo. Subsidies are government payments to domestic producers in the form of cash payments, low to no interest loans, tax breaks, and government ownership of common stock in domestic companies. It helps domestic producers by having extra cash available for production of goods, thereby lowering manufacturing costs and allowing the same companies to gain foreign markets.
Next are local content requirements. This may be imposed if a nation wants to decrease imports by setting a manufacturing requirements in which a stated part or parts of a product must be made 85% domestically. Administrative trade policies. These policies consist of bureaucratic rules, laws, and high-level health and safety standards making importation hard. These policies are categorized into formal and informal trade. Formal trade barriers are in the form of heavy administrative requirements to be completed, while informal trade barriers include the inspection of every product in order to check for disease or suspicious content.
So next are the anti-dumping policies. These policies are set by a nation in order to prevent selling of goods in a foreign market at a price below their production cost to gain a larger share of that nation's market.
Lastly, the exchange rate controls. This can be used to make a nation's product cheaper abroad by lowering the value of its currency in the foreign exchange markets. In other words, a nation can sell its currency in foreign exchange markets where it loses value against other currencies, causing the price of imports to rise while lowering the cost of its exports that will help a nation increase the opportunity to sell its products and goods in foreign markets.
Since protectionism and the way it works were already explained, we can now proceed to the benefits of such policies and their potential costs.
Potential cost? The cost of the good that it should be, but still, he didn't choose me.
Whoa. Okay, back to the topic, we have the potential benefits of protectionism. For the infant industry argument, countries may impose tariffs on goods to protect new industries against free trade, and it enables some industries to survive. An example of that is your one and only US President Trump, who placed tariffs on steel imports and tried to protect jobs in the US steel industry. Aside from that, it can help develop new industries to give more diversity to the economy, can raise revenue for the government and protect certain key industries from international competition to try and safeguard jobs. We can see that protectionism is greatly factional in our trade industry. Now, let's discuss the disadvantages of practicing protectionism.
It is argued that if trade falls, then protectionism will have many negative effects. There are potential negative effects that may be experiencing that lead to retaliation and therefore higher imports prices and higher consumer prices, and consumer will have to pay higher prices for imports of goods.
So, apart from higher prices, it leads to lower overall demand, causing job losses in other industries, and exporters will see a fall in demand. causing less output and possibly unemployed that may really affect the economy.
Additionally, protectionism can encourage inefficient firms to stay in business, and there is less scope for specialization and economies of scale, and it can keep smaller national firms that can benefit from same economies of scale. There is less competitive pressures for firms and economies to cut costs.
Motives of protections. Protectionism has some advantages and a handful of drawbacks. So, why do states still resort to this kind of trade policy? Well, it's time to know why. The following are the motives for such protectionist policies. I know what you're thinking. We're not talking about a large star right here. We're referring to new and declining industries. I know. It's clever, but with protectionism, new firms become protected from foreign competitors, and sunset industries will decline slowly, thus avoiding some of the negative effects of such drop.
Barriers may also impose to protect strategic industries like energy, water, steel, armaments, and food.
Barriers may be placed to prevent unfair competition such as dumping by foreign firms at prices below cost.
Protecting an industry may in the short run project jobs, though in the long run it is unlikely that jobs can be protected indefinitely.
As what many economists have pointed out, overspecialization carries danger, which might occur as a result of taking the theory of comparative advantage to its extreme. Thus, retaining some self-sufficiency is seen as a sensible economic strategy given the risk of global downturns, and an over-reliance on international trade.
For further understanding, let's take for example the Common Agricultural Policy or the CAP of the European Union. The CAP is a partnership led by the European Union between the actors in the sector of agriculture and the European society. This initiative was launched in 1962.
Generally, it aims to support farmers and improve agricultural productivity, ensuring a stable supply of affordable food, safeguard European Union farmers to make a reasonable living, help tackle climate change and the sustainable management of natural resources, maintain rural areas and landscape across the EU, and keep the rural economy alive by promoting jobs in farming, agri-food industries, and associated sectors.
As what was mentioned earlier, governments embark on taking protectionist tactics to protect a certain strategic industry among other ground. The agriculture sector was seen by the European Union as strategically relevant as it has a great potential. Hence, this sector was subsidized for it to develop and further compete in the global market.
Remember that free trade is the elimination of barriers to trade to create large open markets for goods and services. And protectionism, on the other hand, is the restriction of trade with other nations in order to protect domestic firms or industries. So free trade can be linked with the laissez-faire approach with no restrictions on trade. Therefore, nothing needs to be done to protect or promote trade and growth because market forces will do so automatically. On the other hand, protectionisms hold that regulations of international trade is important to ensure that markets functions properly. So free trade is seen to be a concept that is economically beneficial. On the other hand, protectionism tends to lead to economic decline and tensions as international trade is one of the major factors that forces nations to get along. A nation that isolates itself can expect to become less competitive over time against countries that face up to international competition. Well, We can suppose growth without innovating, can we?
For clarity, you may refer to the table projected on your screen. In free trade, trade of goods and services are flowing without trade barriers. In protectionism, the act of protection of domestic producers are against foreign competition. In free trade, the government has only a minimum of interference to the import and export, while in protectionism, government restrictions are placed on the imports of foreign competitors in the form of quotas, tariffs, and subsidies. Free trade protects jobs and it allows specialization. And protectionism, it protects domestic industries, especially strategic and infant industries, and it allows freer movement of resources. Free trade provides access to more markets, while protectionism protects national culture. And lastly, free trade fosters efficient market mechanisms, and protectionism increases international competition and efficiency.
I bet you guys learn about protectionism and free trade, right? Let us know in the comment section below. See you soon!